Okay, and then there's examine two scenarios for sewer. The first scenario assumes that sewer trunk lines capable of serving any annexed area are constructed. And it would be assumed that any new development in the area would be required to connect to these sewer trunk lines, and that existing developments would not be connected until existing sewage disposal units started to fail. The cost for this is not included in the report.
What was your last statement?
I said that the cost for extending the sewers into these existing developments is not included in this scenario, so it's not included in the report. Next slide. The second scenario assumes that only the proposed sewer trunk line to the Clearview Mobile Home Park is built and that no others are. Because it is not part of any annexation effort, the cost of the proposed Clearview Mobile Home Park sewer trunk line is not attributed to any annexation scenario, even though that it can be used by several of them. A cost of extension of sewers into existing subdivision is not included in any of these presented scenarios. Next slide. In terms of roads, all scenarios assume that the city would take over maintenance of all public roads in the annexed area and would maintain them in a manner similar to as they are now. The current cost to the county for maintaining these roads was used to estimate the annual cost for the city to maintain these roads. Capital and operating costs that would be associated with any road improvement projects and the taking over of maintenance of any private streets in an annexed area are not included in this report. Next slide. I'm just going to briefly kind of go over the report format so that people are clear what they're reading. The data is essentially presented out in two ways. The first way here is by the different scenarios. Essentially, there's 4 different scenarios in terms of sewer services provided that are being presented, and that's based on there being 2 options for fire service and 2 options for sewer. So that's a total of 4 scenarios. Which ones are being presented or listed on the top there? Then as you go across the column, it lists things like the area that's being discussed, which keys to the maps. The net annual income, which is calculated using the expected tax revenues, plus the expected annual cost, which includes primarily salaries for additional staff needed, and the other thing would be annual cost for maintaining roads that primarily makes up that. On the ones that assume that the new fire station would be built, it lists what the proportion of that fire station would be attributed, the cost of that fire station would be attributed to the annexed area. It also lists out things like population and the number of households in the area based on the 2010 census. And finally, there on the second column is a calculation of how many years it would take the city to require make back the capital costs they would need to invest in the annexation. So go ahead to the next slide. And then the bulk of the report looks like this, and this is a breakdown for each of the annexation areas. It contains much of the same data, but instead of listing it out by the types of services provided, it depicts a particular area and lists all the associated data with it.
It's not in the report, is it?
So that concludes my explanation on this report, and so I understand it's an awful lot of information, and it's tricky to put together, so any questions that you might have?
Mayor.
And Claire?
Yes, please.
Andrew, has the people of this area been contacted, or a survey has been taken asking them if they're in favor or not in favor of what you're proposing?
Not at the moment. The task in putting this report together, as it was given to me, was just to establish what it would cost the city of Muscatine if it were to annex into this particular area. So this is essentially establishing what the price tag would be. What you're talking about would come at a later and subsequent stage.
You're talking about the price tag. I don't know how you can put a price tag on a half a squad car or so many police officers. Truly that I see numbers, but I don't know if it includes benefits.
Yeah, it does, and the cost for the fire and the police, and these were all developed in conversations with the relevant department heads, and so this was done working with them. And
this is using 2011 data?
Correct.
For costs? Okay.
Andrew, I saw you had the spreadsheet with the prorated costs on
Correct.
there. But I'm assuming you have what the total cost for each section would be. In other words, it looks like you're estimating $1.5 million for a fire station and roughly $500,000 for a pumper truck. Do you know how many firefighters, emergency responders you estimated we'd have to hire?
For the new fire station, the information I got from the fire chief was it would take approximately 6 to staff a new fire station. So then, but the salary would be for 6 firefighters was used for the base of that salary, and then it was prorated.
Okay.
So, excuse me.
Well, I'm just wondering when you take the $2 million in capital costs for fire department number 3, and then what other capital costs were involved in terms of infrastructure? Was it just the sewer?
In these scenarios, yes, it was just the sewer.
Okay, and what was,
and police equipment would be the other one.
and police equipment? Do you know what those total costs were? Not prorated?
For the police equipment?
Yes.
Well, the police equipment wasn't prorated.
Okay, so the police equipment, do you know what that cost is?
Oh, I have to, it's in, you have your, I believe the cost for the annual benefit and salaries of a police officer was given to me as $56,909, and the base cost to buy and outfit a squad car was given to me as $46,650. So those were the numbers I was given to use by the police chief.
And we were just looking at one?
Well, that depends on the scenario. If you're looking at, to maintain the current police officer to resident ratio, if you'd have to hire 3 police officers, then you're looking at 3, and that depends on the population of the area you're looking at, and it goes through that.
Okay.
So if they look on page 8, my bifocals aren't getting there. It gives the individual, it says no fire station or sewer constructed. Area A, there's 3 3 police officers added 3 firefighters.
Correct.
And the cost associated.
Right.
Okay.
Andrew, can you explain your logic on just only the beginning salary for a beginning police officer or fire versus some kind of an average? I mean, would an average reflect more accurately the true cost?
I think that's a fair point, and we can adjust the model to do that if you want to see the numbers like that.
Yeah, I guess that's the column I would like to see, is just for this scenario.
I can
Here's
certainly.
the total price tag not prorated.
For the fire?
Yeah, because we don't have any plans today to build a fire station number 3. So, I mean, it is a total cost to the city if we were to annex and do that. It's not,
Well,
to me, it's
that's
not
why there's
appropriate.
there's also, if you don't build, it's just additional staffing to serve the area. So it's broken out that way. So you can look at just the cost if you assume that. So there is that. If you want, we can add that third one where Fire Station 3 is constructed and you attribute all the costs of that to the annexed area. If you want to see the numbers that way, I can certainly.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see the total capital cost.
Being attributed to any annexation area?
Yes.
Okay.
Wasn't a police officer $80,000?
Anybody else?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I'd like to just clarify something on the services piece. In the annexed areas, those residents are receiving essentially all of the services that residents receive. It's most similar to the area in which I live up on Eagle Ridge, for example. We receive all city services other than sewer and other than street maintenance. So those are the only services that are not provided. Police is provided, fire is provided, garbage is provided, recycling is provided. All of the normal city services are provided in all of these scenarios. The question is, do we do something more than providing a sewer trunk line to an area? Do we get involved in maintaining the city's, the private streets? And we have areas in town where we provide all city services, but we do not maintain the streets, we do not provide snow removal, and we do not provide sewer service. We have areas like that within the city's limits. So that's essentially what we're talking about in this area out here. If you want to see scenarios and costs for doing that, for installing the sewer and for upgrading the streets, we can include those costs at a future session. However, we started to look at that, and once you start to do that, the payback increases exponentially. You're talking 10, 15, 20 years, and in some cases, there is no payback once you start to do that. Ultimately, the City Council is going to have to decide if there's an interest in annexation, and then we'll have to decide what plan we're going to put together if there's an interest in doing that, what services we're going to provide, and make that case before the Development Board. That's the agency or group that will ultimately decide if there's annexation, what the services are going to be.
Greg, you might want to clarify that for the citizens.
The City Development Board
is the
City Development Board is a state, I don't want a committee, or it's not really an agency, but it's there's 5 members appointed, I believe, by the governor, and those 5 individuals will determine whether an involuntary annexation is going to happen, and if it's going to happen, what specifically the services are that the city is going to provide, and over what period of years they're going to provide that service. If there was, the council was decide that they'd like to proceed and move in that direction, we'd have to put our case together and describe exactly what services we're going to provide over what time frame, and make that case to the City Development Board. But the scenario you have tonight, they essentially would be receiving all city services but sewer and but street maintenance. No sewer and no street maintenance. We'd have the main, and if they wanted to add on at their cost, they could do that, or if they wanted to upgrade their streets, their private streets, to city standards, they could then request that the council and the city take that over at some time in the future. But as Andrew's put it together here tonight, those two items are not included in here. I don't know.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Yeah. Council, is anybody that has a question now? Anyone?
I have a question
Phil.
for Steve. It seems to me that when we had a review of the area within 2 miles of the bypass over the last 10, 15 years, they were required, if they were a developer was going to be putting in a street, to put it in as to the city specs. For instance, the one across from Municipal Golf Course is 6 or 8 inches of concrete. That meets city requirements.
That's true. And I think the year was 1986. We enacted the ordinance providing for subdivision review, concurrent subdivision review for all properties located within 2 miles of the current corporate limits at that time. And state code allows us to do that. And what that's intended to do is allow the Planning Commission, in conjunction with the county partners, to review subdivision plans to make sure there isn't any skewed alignment of streets and those kinds of things, with the understanding that in the foreseeable future, at some point, they would likely become, that 2 mile area would likely become a part of the city. It might be 10 years out, it might be more than that, but that's the basis for it. That's the only review the city has. They don't have zoning control, building control, or anything else, just the right of review of the subdivision. As a part of that, the city enacted rural road standards, and that's a term, and it's found in the city code. It's on the website if you want to look for it, in Title 12, but it essentially requires that those subdivisions have a paved street 24 feet wide, and that they be constructed to an engineering design number of 4. Now there's a number of combinations of surfacing materials, aggregate bases and concrete, or combination of asphalt and aggregate, that will allow you to get to the structural number of 4. So the design person or the developer has choices of what he wants to use, but they have to design to that standard. And for those of you that are present that are unfamiliar with that, that would be the same structural strength as 7 inches of Portland cement, which is what's required for a city street. But how you get there is up to you, as long as you meet that number. They do not have to have curbs and gutter, because a lot of the rural sections, as everyone here knows, has greater